And it is winter here in the Midwest, even though, according to the calendar, we've still got 2 weeks to go. 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks, but still, we're building up to our first blizzard of the winter. And the wind outside is raging, and the fire is so delightful, and yada, yada, yada. So, how are you this morning, Barrett?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Does that mean that chestnuts are roasting on the open fire? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think I may pick up some a little bit later on and definitely give that a spin. I love roasted chestnuts. I think they are just exquisite. And, they're almost like a national treat in Italy. You find it, uh, Germans and Italians and Swiss are very much aficionados of that little treat from this dream world. So there are some good things here
That's
interspersed
right.
between the craziness.
Yeah, those chestnuts are like sweet and nourishing, and hopefully, our sharings here are also sweet and nourishing.
That would be good. Yes. I've been in a kind of a rampage here with the family as far as cooking. I've been making some really great meals and am starting to bake all of my own cookies and treats for them. Because number one, the stuff you buy in the store isn't really all that exciting. And number two, I think it's much more cost effective. So later today, I'll be making sugar cookies and peanut butter cookies. And if anybody out there is ambling around in the snow and you need a cookie, you can just stop in here on the south side of Chicago and I'll have them fresh out of the oven for you.
Well, that sounds like a tasty treat. So we'll alert those amblers out there.
Yes, ambling and rambling. And before I start rambling, we should probably get focused on what we're chatting about today. So, and that is, we're looking here at number 18 as far as the chapters in the course, the passing of the dream. And we're down to section 5, the happy dream. So, what are your thoughts about this section?
Well, I think that the happy dream is really all about how we're looking at the world. As you were just alluding to, this world can be kind of crazy sometimes, and we can uh, feel like we're getting crazy as we're trying to deal with it and cope with it and live our lives in it. Um, and the happy dream is really about a way of looking at this world that is coming from the heart. So there's always this way for us to see with a loving perspective. And sometimes it seems hard, sometimes it seems like we don't know exactly how to get there. But the good news is that that is always available to us. And Jesus uses terms like the vision of Christ, seeing the face of Christ in everyone. And I think it's actually a kind of a neat idea to consider that as we're going through our lives, as we're moving from place to place and interacting with people, to consciously think, am I seeing the Christ in this person? And if we can really see that everyone we're interacting with is Jesus and has that eternal light shining in them, it really changes our interactions. When we're driving down the highway and we're getting pissed off at that guy who just buzzed by us, if in that moment we can think to ourselves, am I seeing the Christ in that person? That can really switch our attitude, and it can diffuse whatever ego tricks are kind of starting to bubble up, and say, we can say to ourselves, I really do want to see the truth in every circumstance. And the good news is that it might not exactly change what's happening out there in the world, but it will always change how you feel. It will always change your experience of what's going on. And I think that's what we're working on right here.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, I think it does change events and circumstances in your world because I think that when you are aligning yourself with that idea of forgiveness and not putting up a lot of fuss and resistance to the appearance of things going on around you, I think that you are creating opportunities to be led in the direction of a less conflicted life experience. And one of the things I like about the Course is that when you reduce it to the lowest common denominator, it's not about fixing circumstances. It's not about altering society. It's not about getting involved with Greenpeace and saving whales and dolphins and the ocean and all that sort of thing. The reality is, at the core of what we're learning how to do with the Course in Miracles, is how to heal relationships. And that starts with self, and it extends out into the universe around us. But every relationship where we have a successful transformation, where we are able to forgive and see that relationship transformed by love, that gives us a little bit higher level to see the world from a different perspective. So I think it does actually have the effect of altering the surroundings and the events that you encounter, because really what you're doing is you're healing your own vision, you're healing yourself as you grow into a deeper level of acceptance and love and appreciation for those around you.
Yeah. I think as you do hold that new perspective, new avenues can open up. It's definitely true. And a lot of times when we're in a state of fear, we can't see the loving possibility. We might be trying to decide between two courses of action here in the world, and it might seem like one's not a whole lot better than another. But when we open up our heart, we can see, okay, well, maybe one of those perspectives is better, or maybe one of them is a little bit more loving. And, or maybe there's a whole nother way that I didn't even consider that all of a sudden is opening up and revealing itself. So, so just to kind of read a little bit of this section too. The happy dream. Prepare you now for the undoing of what never was. If you already understood the difference between truth and illusion, the atonement would have no meaning. The holy instant, the holy relationship, the Holy Spirit's teaching, and all the means by which salvation is accomplished would have no purpose. So I think what he's starting to say here is that we need to start to see what the difference is between what's real and what's not real. And Jesus, at various points in the text and throughout the Course, basically gives us an outline. He says that what is all-encompassing, eternal, and unchanging, that is real. And what is fleeting, what is temporal, what shifts and changes is unreal. And if we look around at the world that we live in, we can see that there's nothing here that's eternal. And what that gives us is a very clear demarcation, that what we want is we want what does not change. What we want is what we want, this perfect love and joy that is within us. And that's not to say we have to, give up this world, but we do need to give up our attachments to the things in this world. And I think that distinction is really what he's talking about here.
Yes, that's very true. And, as we continue with that same paragraph, he goes on to suggest that what you imagine to be your reality and your truth is more often than not completely upside down. And I love that last sentence, or the last two sentences. He says, put yourself not in charge of changing, things to become the happy dream. In other words, don't go out and try to fix things, because in reality, nothing is broken, because this is a projection of your mind, of your thinking. And then he says, for you cannot distinguish between advance and retreat. I really like that idea of surrendering our judgments about ourselves, because a lot of times people carry this burden of guilt or shame or, angst over an event that happened 5 months ago or 20 years ago or whatever. And until you can get to the point where you can begin to step out of that, you're really going to be carrying that burden, and that's going to be altering all of the experiences you have in life, because you tend to repeat those themes over and over and over again. So in that last sentence, he says, some of your greatest advances you have judged as failures, and some of your deepest retreats you have elevated as success. And boy, when you get outside of the ego and look at events in your life, when you can do it without that empathy and that desire to protect that little self that you think you are, when you can look at things from that broader perspective and step out of the timeline, you realize that a lot of things where you thought you accomplished or where you were the victor, in truth, created more wounds and more pain and more turmoil for those around you and ultimately for yourself. So this part of the dream is something that's very, very personal to all of us, and we have to learn how to stop evaluating and judging the events and the situations that we have either encountered or created over the years in the past. So there's a lot of elements that kind of have to be folded together in the process of coming to that next plateau of comprehension. And once you hit that plateau, once you hit that higher place, you're no longer judging against yourself, and that really begins to make the dream a happy dream.
Yeah, and I think that it really fits right in with this idea that we can't do it on our own. And this next paragraph really just speaks to that so clearly. He says, never approach the holy instant after you have tried to remove all fear and hatred from your mind. That is its function. Never attempt to overlook your guilt before you ask the Holy Spirit's help. That is his function. Your part is only to offer him a little willingness to let him remove all fear and hatred and to be forgiven. So, a lot of times we think we have to do this healing work on our own, and that's the mistake. What he's saying here is that we really can't do it on our own. And it was our idea that we could do any of this on our own that was really the problem in the first place. What is the thought of separation from God, but the idea that I could be better off on my own? But what we're coming to see is that that's not really true. We've played in this kind of sandbox of separation for millennia and all the different incarnations we've had in the different lifetimes. And when we really look at everything that's happened here, when we look honestly at the world around us, it's not a very happy place. There's always someone suffering. There's always someone who, is kind of going through something painful or sad or unhappy. And the good news is that in our space of truth, that's not the case. In heaven, there's only love. In heaven, there's only joy. And we do have to move through some of these dark spots, some of these false ideas in order to get back to that place of opening, that place of peace and joy. But that is our goal, and that's the work of this course.
Yes, that actually brings me back to remembering when I first read the course. When I started going through the text, I arrived at one point where there was that idea introduced, I need do nothing. Mm-hmm. And that was really a pinnacle for me of that sudden discovery of, my responsibility in this journey. Because when we first get juiced up on the course, we think we're going to go out there and raise the dead and heal the sick, sometime next week at least, or at least within the month. And the truth is, it is a very deep and profound and in many ways a very glacial kind of process, because we're not really doing anything. We're allowing things to be undone on our behalf. And when we can finally get past that ego's desire to control and just step back and use that thought, I need do nothing, all of a sudden you find that there's an accelerated process that you encounter, that you start to notice that things are speeding up and that things are getting lighter, and you're feeling less burdened with all of these dark thoughts that you've been keeping in that womb of the subconscious, because that's why we have a split mind. We have all these memories of illusory events and situations that were so painful that we couldn't carry them around in our conscious mind. And so the mind became split, and it has become a repository for all of these hideous acts, not just ones that you imagine that you created yourself, but for all of the hideous acts of humankind. So every Holocaust, every massacre, every instance of Jesus being led to the cross that has occurred in the history of this experience is residing there in what you think is your subconscious, but it's actually the collective subconscious. So once we get away from that desire to control the situation, that is a huge, huge step forward. And that makes it so much easier just to relax and settle down and allow yourself to just wind down. Don't fight the thoughts, just observe them and watch them slow down. And eventually you'll arrive at a place where you're, at least for a moment or two, experiencing a real gentle kind of tranquility. And that's when the chemistry occurs. That's when that event comes along where a new vision, a new idea pops into your mind, and where something dark and hidden that was a burden is undone and released from the collective consciousness. So, and again, that loops back into the realization that we're not doing this just for ourselves, because our work individually heals all of humanity. So when Jesus tells us that we are the light of the world, this is how that works. This is that function of bringing the light into the world.
Yeah, and it's true, because this world is really a hologram. So everything is contained in each of us, and each of us is contained in everything. So this world seems to have a number of distinct objects, and our body seems to be one of those distinct objects. Other people's bodies are another object. But that is really just a trick of the mind. Just like a holographic disc contains all of what will show in every part, so too is everything contained here in every seeming fragment of the truth. And I say seeming fragment because there really is no thing that is other. There's no thing here that is separate somehow from anything else. It's all just a real trick of the mind, and it's a pretty convincing trick. But I like to say the reason it's convincing is because we want to be convinced. So this world would not seem so real unless we really were wanting to be fooled by it and taken in by it. Sometimes we'll have a dream where we're pretty sure that what we're experiencing isn't true, and we just really don't believe it. It doesn't take us in, and eventually we'll start to have that experience more and more with this world, where we'll be moving through this life, we'll be doing whatever we need to do here, but we'll just realize at the same time that nothing is actually occurring. And that state will free us from the burden that the heaviness of this world often gives us. sometimes people say, well, if I don't believe any of this is real, what's to stop me from acting out, or what's to stop people from acting violently? Well, the truth of the matter is, when you really get that nothing here is going on, you don't have any need to be hurtful either. You just are appropriate, but you're hurt less because you don't have the psychological attachment to what's unfolding here. So that's what we need to do, is just kind of consider these ideas, and eventually we start to get them on deeper and deeper and deeper levels.
That's exactly right. And within that whole process, we recognize that the real relationship that we're cultivating is the one with God. And so as we heal our relationship with those around, closer and closer into a loving relationship with God. And one of my favorite thoughts that's been around forever is that as you begin to turn toward God, God begins to turn toward you. And that doesn't mean that God is like turned his back on you by any means. But that means the more you recognize the presence of God, the more that presence becomes tangible in your life. So it really is a very positive, powerful process that the Course presents to us for turning the mundane experiences we have in the world into first tolerable experiences, and then ultimately into opportunities to find greater levels of joy and greater levels of self-realization. And that's the point of what we're doing here, is to outrun our misery until we can stop and address our misery, and then ultimately allow our misery to be healed.
Yeah, and I think both of us would definitely share that we're doing the work too. The reason we're teaching this is because we're still doing these practices. We're still moving through our levels of fear and resistance to the deeper truth. But I think both of us can also testify that we have at times had much deeper experiences of peace and joy than we've ever had before, and that really is attributable to doing this work and to sticking with it. And I think this willingness to keep going is one of the most important characteristics that we can have as students of the Course. And if we're willing to keep going no matter what shows up in our experience, then we can't go wrong. It's only a matter of how quickly are we going to get all the way to this experience of God's total love and peace and joy. And I think just remembering that that's where we're going, and that's what this is all for. That's how we get into the state of being in the happy dream, is by looking at what is afraid in our minds, what we're afraid of, and then saying, Holy Spirit, I need your perspective on this, because obviously if I'm not at peace, then I can't be seeing it with your perspective. And eventually we just start to have this more and more internalized. So it really does start to change our experience.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And then we also notice that the effect we're having on those around us starts to deepen and broaden and become more healing and rewarding. If you observe normal human interactions, there's always highs and lows and combative moments and things of that sort. But as we are moving forward with the Course, we tend to see relationships in general start to take on a whole different texture and tone. And there seems to be a gift or a reward around every corner as we, actually take on this work and actually complete each day's lesson or each day's passage that we're reading from the Course. And it says, through your holy relationship, reborn and blessed in every holy instant you do not arrange, Thousands will rise to heaven with you. Can you plan for this? Or could you prepare yourself for such a function? Yet it is possible because God wills it. So this is the beauty of, again, really committing yourself to doing the work, because it's like sowing in the fields. You know that at some point there is going to be a harvest, and that harvest is going to be something that will not only give you joy, but will extend that joy out into larger and larger circles of people that you are interacting with.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice note for us to wind down on for today, is to realize that as we do this work, we can't help but feel better ourselves. And it's a gift to everyone that we meet as well, that they can choose to experience if they want. So yeah, I really love sharing this message, and I'm really love connecting with you, Chris. So this has been a beautiful day as always.
Yes, it's a wonderful opportunity to force that evolution to occur by not forcing anything to occur, just surrendering to the journey. So we will pick up in 1 week this next section of the happy dream and examine it a little bit more in detail. And if you have thoughts or ideas or questions, definitely reach out to Barrett or myself, either on Facebook or on YouTube, because anytime that we can resolve something in somebody else's mind, we're again stepping more and more into the light.
And that's what we're doing. So here we go, stepping into the light. So I hope you have a beautiful, light-filled rest of your week, Chris, and I'll look forward to talking to you next time.
Absolutely. It's going to be a wonderful weekend with blizzards and snowflakes and all kinds of stuff.
All right. Well, don't stay out in the snow too long, playing and making snowmen.
I absolutely won't. You have a great weekend too, Barrett.
All right. Thanks,
chat
man.
with all of you soon.
All right.